For being racist, I'm going to put you on Facebook.
Nobody.
种族歧视事件频发，族群之间的刻板印象和微暴力令人担忧。
So my grandmother ever asked me before, why can't you just marry a Chinese man? Why do you want to dilute the race? Not diluting the race.
Hey, that store is vegetarian what? You can eat what? Because it's just vegetable, then it's halal, right?
尚达曼成为首位由选民投票选出的非华族民选总统，能否改变现状？尚达曼呢，今年以70.4%的高得票率当选总统。那有人说呢，我们其实已经朝着 race blind 的社会前进了。那新加坡华人呢，以手中的选票来说明自己是可以接受非华族领袖的。你不觉得这也从侧面来表现出大多数华人其实已经不会去区别看待非华族了吗？
但是尚达曼当选只是一个单一事件啊，你有没有看互联网上时不时还会爆出一些种族歧视相关的事件？2020年甚至是高达60起，这是5年来的最高而且这个月初其实就有一个视频很白热啊。
India, I'm Chinese.
Uncle, I'm
It's from the one that you are India.
Wow.
I'm a Chinese. You are the very one. What's driver? What's back customer?
Uncle, I'm Singaporean Eurasian, not Indian.
你看视频里的司机一直就说着我是华人，你是印度人，是最糟糕的那一类，这难道不是种族优越感吗？所以当你说到 race line， 说到华人已经不再计较种族差异的时候，我觉得我很难接受。
但是社交媒体本身就会放大很多事情，包括种族差异，它只会让人看到矛盾啊。这件事情才是孤立事件好吗？那反观尚达曼当选总统，他传达的是一个更加普遍的一个信号。那你看啊，2016年的时候呢，新加坡研究所呢其实就有做过一个调查，当时候人们对于马来族跟印度族呢，当总统的这个支持率分别呢就是65.5%，还有70.6%。那5年之后，支持率呢是有明显的上升，高达82%。所以我们是有进步的。华人身为大多数，对少数族群正在变得更加的包容。
是更包容还是并没有呢？其实我们也把这个问题发到了网上，做了一轮投票。
OK， 我们在早报 IG 上面呢收到了268名网友的投票。你看，73%的人是支持我的，认为华人是更加包容了。
单看早报的投票其实不够具有代表性，因为我们的读者大部分还是华人，所以我们也请马来社群 Lepak Conversation 帮我们把同样的问题发在他们的 IG 上。这边有59%的网民是支持我的观点的，他们认为华人并没有变得更加包容。
这样看来呢，异族同胞跟华人的观点呢是不相同的。到底少数族群是怎么想的呢？就是华人社群是不是对于种族差别还不够敏感呢？让我们去了解一下。我和靳忻决定兵分两路，我来拜访 interracial family Singapore 创办人陈彦宁和她的丈夫 Mahendran，
而我则拜访马来同胞 Yuliana， 她也是 Lepak Conversations 的发起人。
Why you actually started IFSG?
When both of us enter the train, right? Everybody will be like,
Yeah, they'll give us very, very weird looks.
that
Or when we are
one look
walking.
is like, what is this?
Or
Why
when we are
is this
holding
girl
hand.
holding hand? You know, black and
Yeah.
white, yin and yang, you know, that kind of thing.
Oh, I actually have an uncle asking me, 为什么你要跟印度人交往? So there's a lot of weird questions that people will ask.
So we were thinking that since we have already gone through so much of trouble, right? Why don't we share this with others?
So lepak is a common word that's used in Malay, so it means to chill. But there's also this negative belief that if you lepak, it means you're lazy. So we want to confront the stereotypes that are out there about Malay people.
And have you encountered any of these situations yourself?
I mean, so people speak in a language you can't understand in a group setting. I experience this all the time. And because, I'm Malay, and I mean, it's natural because in Singapore, the Chinese are the majority race. So I am in a lot of settings where Mandarin is often and I don't understand it. And kind of nobody realizes that I don't understand. I know people who just prefer to stay silent because it's just easier that way. Especially in the workplace, I feel. Because if you speak up and then someone's not happy about it, would it cost you your job? That's a very real concern that people might have. I feel like this comment is probably similar to this, which is like, physically, they don't want to be in the same space as someone of this race. And I feel like really not just uncomfortable, it's hurtful. Maybe it also has to do with the fact that we are all put inside a box and we have to fit that box. For example, if you meet a Malay person and this person is drinking or not eating halal food, you're like, hey, I thought you're Malay. Why are you not eating halal food? Why are you eating pork? But there are people on a spectrum. Like we are kind of constrained to like a very narrow box, which is like you just have to eat one way and that's it. And if you don't fit into that box, I don't understand you. And maybe there's something wrong with him.
Okay, Kiran, so how's the school going?
Now at this rate, I might fail my exams
Oh, why? What happened?
because I'm not studying every day.
What were some of the obstacles that you have been through?
Our children face quite a number of racism in school. And we find that there are a lot of other mixed race children who do not feel they belong. Okay, the kind of racism I would say is you are not Indian enough to be Indian, or you're not Chinese enough to be Chinese. They are basically in between. So we chose a school that has children from all walks of life, not a SEP school. So he will get to meet people from different races, different religion. He's going to have a lot of exposure and he will not face so much discrimination because they are all mixed. Activity church.
When was it?
Yeah, then he don't know which finger to put. Okay, so one day we were in a lift. We were asked by a 9-year-old boy who started asking, you get married and you have him? And then we said yes. So he said, is it possible to have this? Then we say yes. Oh wow, that's amazing. So it's something that they're not exposed to.
Correct.
So we realized that hey, actually the more you see, the more you talk about it, the more you educate, people will be more accepting.
Recent Tharman's win, he became the first elected non-Chinese president in Singapore. Do you feel that something's changed? Have it changed, like Singapore society changed as well?
It's going to be the very first time that you will see the photos of an Indian and a Chinese, Japanese in every school, in every government building, and the world will see it.
Even, it'd be like, for the kids from young, right? When they
They
look
will
at it,
see,
they'll be like, okay.
They will be more inclusive.
Yeah.
They will not see like, what is your race, what's your skin color. It's no longer about that.
I think Tharman winning does mean that Singapore might be ready for a non-Chinese PM. But I think you also have to look at it from the lens of Tharman himself. Because when he was still a politician, he was a very strong one. He had a lot of votes in Taman Jurong consistently every year. I'm not sure if there are other candidates that perhaps have the same popularity that Tharman has that would allow people to vote for them as their Prime Minister.
So through the winning of Tharman, do you think it's a big step, a big leap, or it's actually a small milestone that we're celebrating?
I would say it's a big milestone. It's a good awareness for the older generation to accept.
I think most of the time what we face is the older generation, the pioneer generation, not being able to accept. They have a lot of objections to things that are not common. Yeah, they just want to follow as it is. So my grandmother ever asked me before, why can't you just marry a Chinese man? Why do you want to dilute the race? Not diluting the race.
Dilute the color only.
50 years
Why
down the
took
road.
9 years for her grandma to accept?
Yeah, so I told her that 50 years down the road, when you look in Singapore, if not just Singapore, worldwide, everyone is going to be mixed. And it's something that we should embrace. We should always embrace change and not just stick to what you know.
Certainly, President Tharman brought something to the table. When it comes to the Prime Minister, certainly I think many of the biases have certainly decreased over the years. We've seen in our polls. But at the same time, we cannot discount the fact that race is still a consideration that may lurk in some people's minds, which of course has to be overcome.
在地铁上，人们不愿意坐在异族乘客的旁边，这些都是所谓的微暴力，也就是 microaggression。这些行为并不犯法，甚至不能说是不道德的，但是却会让少数族群感受到自己是被歧视，或者是不被接受的。这种情况如果是长期和广泛的存在的话，族群之间的隔阂甚至是会让社会产生分化的。
OK， 我觉得这些呢确实会让人觉得不舒服。我自己在生活当中也有碰过类似这样的情况，但是 微暴力有时候是非常主观的，你要用一个这么主观的层面去看待事情，它本身就会放大种族差异。我们应该用更客观的方式去看待事情。
那你觉得什么是更客观的方式呢？
我们可以从趋势上来看啊，比如说异族通婚的比例，这样就可以看出种族之间的接受度有没有增加。你看我这边有一份 IPS 2021年的报告，这边可以看到呢，有超过半数的国人是能够接受与马来族或印度族结婚的。那这个数字相对于2016年高出了不少，当年呢只有30%的国人是能够接受的。
但是你看，新加坡人最能接受的还是跟华族通婚啊，这个数字甚至高达92.2%哎。
我觉得这是可以理解的，因为毕竟我们是一个华人占大多数的一个社会。让人欣慰的是呢，其实这个数据上来看，华人对异族的包容度呢是有增加的。
我觉得从大趋势上来看，确实是这样的，但是我觉得当中还是有一些盲点存在的，而且呢，我们甚至没有意识到自己的一些行为其实是一种歧视。你看 IPS 的这份报告，超过30%的华人认为自己完全没有种族歧视，但是异族同胞当中只有不到1/4的人这么认为。我觉得从数据来看，华人恐怕是高估了自己吧。
我承认自己呢对少数族群的了解还并不够多，但这些年呢，我也会去关注一些种族歧视的课题。然后我自己也自认为不会因为别人是另外一个种族而去歧视另外一个人。
但这其实就是问题啊！就我们华人来讲，种族问题其实很少出现在我们的生活圈子里面，这就造成了一种假象，让我们认为身边没有种族问题，然后让我们放松警惕。你看啊，在2016年，有29.1%的华人认为自己完全不歧视异族，但是到了2021年呢，已经有55.5%的华人这么认为了。这样评价自己其实是很危险的。
那大多数和少数之间必然会存在盲区，这个是无可避免的呀。
那我们应该要反思的就是，作为大多数族群，我们看不见种族问题，是不是我们应该要更加关注的一个盲区呢？
Just the fact that there are sheer much larger numbers of Chinese within Singapore means that Chinese culture, Chinese language, ways of doing things, I mean, of course, favor those who are Chinese. You're more used to it. It's easier for you to adapt to that compared to perhaps if you're a minority, for instance. So you have the CMIO policies. It helps us to address the fact that there are racial differences, which needs to be accounted for.
其实有多过60%的受访者，他们觉得CMIO 这个模式是可以保留的，然后再有多15%的受访者觉得可以再加以改善。国人对于这个模式来说，还是觉得它是有一个存在的意义的。
Of course, as society continues to mature and race becomes less and less important, perhaps we don't even need to have this kind of categorizations. But I think we still are some way to go on that regard.
种族课题复杂多面，有时候看得到彼此的差异是尊重，有时候看不到才是公平与包容。
走进争议核心，听到不同声音，双声道这个节目就是让我们能够更多的去了解彼此的立场。
我们下一期应该讨论什么样的一些话题呢？欢迎大家留言跟分享，我们下期见。走，吃饭。